Welcome, one and all, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward, and with me, as always, is the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. That is Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm pretty pumped. We're going to talk Batman, particularly Batman the Animated Series. So I'm very excited.
Can I talk about Batman in another form of media?
Okay.
I was just at an event at Warner Brothers, and I had the great pleasure to join a group of people listening to Paul Dini discuss his new book that actually is out this week. It's called Dark Knight, True Batman Story.
And it is a true Batman story.
It is. It's. I don't want to give too much away about this graphic novel because it is just so powerful and truly so well written and so revealing and so raw, to be quite honest. It's an autobiographical graphic novel that Dini wrote about an event that took place actually around the time that the animated series was on the air and that he was writing it. So it's, for many reasons, I was really curious and interested in this graphic novel. I had read it a couple months ago, loved it, and finally got a chance to hear Paul discuss his accounts and his words and talk about the process of writing this book. And
you've heard Paul talk about it a few times. You were on another panel with him
yes.
at WonderCon.
Yes. So I've heard him speak about it. This was really, for me, the first time that I had the opportunity to hear him discuss the journey that he took following the events. And so just to be clear, he was assaulted. He experienced a traumatic event that involved some interpersonal violence and an attack on him. And following the attack, he goes through some pretty serious aftermath, self-doubt, psychological, I guess one would even say post-traumatic stress.
Sure.
And certainly some self-discovery that relates a lot to what he's writing about with the animated series.
Yeah. And in fact, it happened, like you said, right around the time that he was writing the animated series. In fact, he describes it as right around the time that he was writing for Mask of the Phantasm. And this particular event even made him stop wanting to write for Batman. Seriously, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb, and I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say I think it's a very important read. I think that people need to read it, not just so that they get an insight into Paul, but really an insight into, I'm going to say, the hero in all of us and the struggles that we all go through, and certainly how he stood up and came back from this traumatic event. It's really, really a powerful read, just like you said.
Right. It for me, it really is about how tragedy, how these atrocities, these injustices that we experience in our world can be better understood. I mean, one thing that's really interesting is that through his narrative, he really demonstrates that an experience like the one he had could reveal some real deeper, darker issues about the self. It took that tragedy for him to really do some self-exploration and understand what was going on in his life. But also it allows us to be able to rise up, to be resilient and to learn something from it. So our ability to make meaning from something that is, in the best words I can find, basically life-threatening, life-ending. So I find that especially now when we're encountering such tragic and harrowing events, and I keep saying in our world, we often talk about Batman's world on the show. In our world, we're experiencing a lot of evil and a lot of tragedy, and so we're struggling to make sense of it. So it took, I've been trying to do this for a long time, and I'm struggling, but Paul wrote one book that absolutely captures that, the ability to take Batman's stories and through the eyes and the wisdom of Batman, tell us how to find meaning from very sad, terrible things.
And we should say, going in, that I think Paul would be the first person to say that he's still not quite over those traumatic events. This is one way of coping with what happened to him, was writing this story these many years later. And it's a really emotional time when you get to hear him talk about it and open himself up. And you've spoken about vulnerability before. It's a really big deal. And, just like with his writing, Paul, speaks beautifully about, these sort of tragic events. And, look, guys and girls, just go to your local comic shop, pick up this copy or pick up a copy of this book. You absolutely will not regret it. We get to talk about another one of Paul's writings this week, Drea, in our episode, Make 'em Laugh. Paul actually co-wrote this episode, and it brings up some questions about everyone's favorite clown prince of crime, the Joker.
Yeah, I think if we were to go back and tally up how many episodes the villains have, my guess is that he would have the most.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I know one of our listeners is going to go and do that for us.
Oh, you let us know. You let us know who had the most in this first run of Batman the Animated Series. Drea, let's talk about Make 'em Laugh. Actually, by the way, that's my favorite musical number of all time, Make 'em Laugh, from Donald O'Connor.
Okay, so for folks like me who are a little bit younger than you,
it wasn't a new release when I
So what is that what does Make 'em Laugh a reference to?
Donald O'Connor has this brilliant musical scene in my favorite musical, Singin' in the Rain, where he sings Make 'em Laugh, and he does this great dance number. It's all about the movie industry, the movie, and he's on a set with his good friend, played by Gene Kelly. Oh, it's so good. Kind of like this episode. We're talking about an episode that is not only going to revisit a couple of our former villains, but introduces us to at least two brand new ones.
They don't really count, though. It's villains.
I'm going to count them because Batman gets to beat them up. That first villain is none other than the Condiment King.
Whoa. Oh.
Condiment.
Oh.
Condiment King.
Okay.
The uncanny Condiment King.
This is a man who comes in basically wearing ketchup and mustard, guns. He's kind
of like a Bobo Mr. Freeze. but with ketchup.
Yeah, he is.
He squirts, like his thing is squirting ketchup and mustard on people's faces.
Yeah. He's got these two guns that have tubes connected to this thing on his back, and he's firing mustard and ketchup at people and trying to rob them in this very fancy schmancy restaurant. And again, he's the Condiment King. That is, until Batman comes along.
It's gonna be one of those nights.
We find out that the Condiment King is not actually any sort of thief, but he's a legendary comedian.
Still no clues in the mystery behind comedian Buddy Standler's one-man crime spree last night. A rampage that ended with a trip to the hospital for the famed TV comic.
I realize that this is not where this episode is going, but this is what you would likely characterize this as a psychotic break. Like, here's a man who is seemingly, successful, average, high functioning, and then is completely changed. His personality is not just different, but he seems to be very distant and not quite fitting in. His reality doesn't fit our reality. And as you notice in that beginning scene where he's attacking various diners in this restaurant, they're not really threatened by him.
Well, would you be if some dude came into the restaurant with ketchup and mustard cannons? I thought they were going to do more. Like I thought it was going to be like
poison or something, like toxic.
Yeah, like I thought it was going to be more like haha, laugh at me. Well, laugh at this, and then really all he did was mess up their clothes. But I thought it was going to be more dramatic, and instead he was basically just a ridiculous villain.
But what was his point? Like, why was he doing this?
But that's the thing, is he didn't have one. And we'll go into why in a second. See, that's the thing, is no one understands why this comedian did this. In fact, he's basically still in a coma or unconscious or something. And his agent is saying, like, I don't get it. I don't know why he would do that. This is very much unlike him. There's no motivation for this. And then as a result, his TV show gets taken off the air, and his fans are all concerned. I mean, Robin is a big fan of this guy, and he doesn't understand. And in fact, he and Alfred were going to go watch this comedy show, and Barry was going to be one of the judges of this comedy show. And so no one can understand the motivation for this. So everyone is a bit baffled, and then it turns out that there is yet another weird villain who is a bit zany. Alfred gets a chance to witness this one. This guy is dressed like Chuck E. Cheese.
Right.
I mean, he's wearing a ridiculous rat costume, and he calls himself the Pack Rat. And again, it's another one of those zany sort of, really? Am I supposed to take you seriously?
Right, he's not threatened. Like, he ends up not actually stealing money. He takes objects, worthless objects.
Yeah.
And so he's not threatening.
Although he is considerably more threatening than the Condiment King, because instead of condiment guns, this guy's got a real machine gun, and he is legitimately using it. That guy is legitimately dangerous. But it turns out that just like the Condiment King, the Pack Rat is really not in any way a criminal. He, in fact, is yet another famous comedian.
It's Harry Loomis, another famous comedian.
These are not real comedians, right?
These are not real comedians, but I think in some way they represent, or, especially the third one, and that is Roseanne Barr. I mean, it's not.
That's not. No.
It's not Roseanne Barr. It's Lisa Lorraine. But she is very clearly meant to be Roseanne Barr.
Yeah?
Pizza delivery?
I didn't order any pizza. But I'll take it. How much?
It's on me.
Hey!
And she is taken from her home. Really, this all points to one of the rogues, right, Drea? You would think you've got a couple of different people.
Yeah, you have a pattern of persons who have
gone.
Who have experienced some kind of personality change. One would say they are being brainwashed. Mm-hmm. And we know that the Mad Hatter is into that a lot.
That is true.
But it's not the Mad Hatter.
It's not the Mad Hatter. They go to Arkham Asylum, where they find Jervis Tetch, and it turns out that Jervis, in fact, is under his own spell.
Wow, he's really out.
Batman and Robin go back to the Batcave, and that's when Alfred basically tells them about Lisa Lorraine's kidnapping, and they put all of this information together and realized that it had to have been in some way in connection to the Laugh Off comic competition.
Right.
This is an event where comedians from all over Gotham compete to be known as...
It's like Last Comic Standing.
Yes, well before its time. This was Last Comic Standing.
This was the first. This was like Last Comic Standing 1.0 beta.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. We get a little insight into the kinds of things that Robin enjoys. And not just Robin, but Alfred. The two of them love this competition. In fact, Robin videotaped last year's. So it's the kind of thing that if Batman the Animated Series was taking place now, Robin would be DVRing, and I imagine that he and Alfred would be just sitting on the couch watching it together, once a year. They couldn't wait.
Right.
And all three of these folks were going to be judges at this competition. Well, that sort of leads them to this one person.
Smilin Shecky Rimshot. Badum.
For starters, he didn't even register on time. He sort of takes the stage and insists on doing his act, and they insist that he leave, and then he vows to get even. This is where the Bat computer comes in handy. And Batman's keen eye, because if you make a couple of changes to that guy's face...
Without the hat. And different hair.
The Joker.
He changes everything about that image, by the way.
Everything
He has like a still of this comedian and manages to discover that it's the Joker.
Yes. It is clearly the Joker. How you could have gotten that from this still, I don't know.
He looks nothing like him. He changed everything about him.
He manipulates the entire image until
He
eventually...
basically, he photoshops the face until it looks like the Joker and then says, oh my gosh, this is the Joker.
You could have been the Joker if you manipulated your face enough the way that Batman did. Because at one point, he's like, well, give him this and then give him this. And you're like, okay, it's getting there. But then the computer changes his entire eye structure. I mean, it's like, now it's the Joker.
It's sort of like moving. It's sort of the transition between the first Joker in the animated series and then the next iteration.
Right. They're getting
where
there.
It changes drastic. Yeah. I think maybe this is how they design it on the new.
This is the bridge. Well, I have to ask. So, Drea, are we meant to think, clearly this is in some way a little bit of an allusion to the Killing Joke, where we find out that the backstory to the Joker is that he was a failed comedian who, after one bad day, basically became the Joker. We're not meant to believe, though, that the Joker has only been around for a year.
No, I think that for his jollies, he would put himself in disguise and enter into this contest.
Yes.
And it's clear that he's not into it for cash prizes or for anything other.
There's a trophy.
Yes, he wants the recognition. He wants the trophy. He wants the title.
So let's talk about that, because that's something that's revealed at the end of the episode. We're going to jump forward a bit. Let's talk about his motivation for wanting this trophy.
It's not the trophy that matters. It's the title. I am the greatest clown this dismal burg has ever seen. What would the common folk do without my pranks and antics?
So, Drea, I have to wonder how much of this is about ego and the Joker's need to be considered or recognized as the funniest guy. Or, go with me on this, how much of this could be his own insecurity because he actually had to kidnap or frame the judges to get them out of the way so that he would then be considered the number one comedian. Like, he had to eliminate the competition or the judges of the competition in order to get this prize by default. So what is your take on this?
Well, I think there are a couple things going on here, because one could simply say that his narcissism is so, is so huge, is so pervasive, that he is the kind of guy that must win, must get this recognition. But then there's that kind of bizarre, out of touch, psychotic element where he's willing to do things and create a reality that doesn't exactly exist, right?
And you've said in the past that even narcissism can not necessarily be a love of oneself, but even a little bit of a self hatred kind of.
Well, I'll be clear. Of course, all of us have some element of narcissism. When I say narcissism, I just mean the personality trait. Like all of us have a level of extroversion, introversion, all those things. So when you get to the point where someone's narcissism is so pervasive, you would consider it a personality disorder, then you're considering that diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder. And that's when the pervasive narcissism, that level of grandiosity, that level of needing to be the center of attention, needing admiration from everyone, that overwhelming sense of self-importance, that those elements together, that preoccupation with the self, is so, it's so prominent that it causes some kind of interference. It causes others to distance themselves. It causes trouble with occupational functioning. It causes trouble with interpersonal functioning, all that stuff. So that, just generally speaking, could be what we're seeing here with his absolute need to be recognized. And of course, the subtext of that is that the only way he's going to feel valuable is if he receives that recognition from other people. He can't be sitting in a room just telling himself he's great. He needs to have that recognition from others. He needs to have that significant attention, validation, and praise from the social world. So that creates an issue, right?
Right.
Because the other thing about the Joker is that he has other elements about him. It's not just that he's narcissistic. In previous episodes, we've talked about him being, of course, he's violent. He's antisocial. He doesn't have empathy. He hurts other people. He doesn't care about other people's feelings. So you combine narcissism with that antisocial personality trait, and you have this formula for quite a dangerous person, someone willing to do harm in order to get that feeling of importance.
Now, he specifically wants, if we go back to our Christmas with the Joker analysis of the Joker, he specifically wants that feeling of importance, not necessarily from Gotham City, but from Batman. Is this potentially a cry for attention, knowing that Batman would eventually come and get him, and he's got to think that Batman's going to solve this crime at some point?
I didn't really think about that, but I guess he must know that that's going to be the consequence. And we do see them interact. I mean, I think what we've talked about before, another element of the Joker is that he's really into risk. He's really into adrenaline. He's really into the rush.
He's also really into balloons.
He likes balloons.
Big balloon people or animals or whatever. Like, this was a very much an 89 Tim Burton,
yes.
The bicentennial celebration. This was very much a nod to that, where once again the Joker is riding on a giant balloon. Yes.
He that whole performance aspect. I mean, I'll go back to what you said about, that theme of smiling and performing, even though you don't feel that way on the outside. I'm sorry, even though you don't feel that way on the inside, right?
Right. So, Drea, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about our IMSI community. One of the folks over there, in asking a question about this episode, let me see if I can find it. The King in Yellow asks, okay, so this episode is all about how the Joker sees himself as a comedian, which raises the question, who are the comedians that the Joker admires? What are his aesthetics regarding the art of comedy? How does that interact with his psychology? The Joker is a clown and considers himself a performer, as you just mentioned. It's that element of performance. What is a comedic performance that he admires? What's Joker's idea of a good comedy album? So I find this interesting. I don't necessarily think that the Joker would like anyone, because I don't necessarily, maybe Gallagher, the big mallet, and but really the Joker doesn't necessarily think that there's anybody on par with himself, right?
No, I don't think. Remember that time he kidnapped that kid and tried to groom him to be a performer? I think he believes he's the best, and I don't even know that he enjoys being an observer, being somebody who witnesses other things.
He wouldn't have the patience to sit and watch another comedian do their act.
No, he might have ADHD. I think he needs to be a participant. He needs to be activated. He needs to be involved. He needs also something happening to him.
Right.
And that goes back to that aspect of he needs people to praise him, or he needs people to hate him.
Yeah.
He loves when Batman is angry at him and lashes out at him. He's the recipient of that. So there's this kind of need to be engaged and to be distracted maybe in his world. And there's no diagnosis for that. It's just more of his personality. And I may have mentioned a couple of other diagnostic labels, but as a whole, he's actually quite complex. And there's no one label or diagnosis that best captures what his personality is, or what his mental illness might be.
Right.
But I would actually respond to this person in our IMSI community and say that I'm not sure he even entertains the idea that he could be entertained by somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right.
Oh, no, I think Batman is his favorite performer.
Oh. And he wants a personal...
I think he thinks Batman's life is a joke, and he laughs at it.
Interesting. I like the way that you're thinking. I like the way that you're thinking. That's pretty deep.
Okay.
That's pretty deep. I like it. So we've also got an email from one of our longtime listeners and contributors, Sully. And he brings up an interesting point. And Dre, I know this is a really big deal for you. So I think we should handle this kind of seriously here for a moment. He says, I just want to touch on something, because I always believe in an opportunity to talk about something is an opportunity for awareness. You are huge into suicide prevention. I believe in that. Okay, in this episode, we are met with 3 microchipped comedians of Gotham. And he points out one of them is very close to Roseanne Barr. One is a Roseanne Barr analog. Another comedian, though, getting big at this time in the 90s was a man by the name of Richard Jeni. I don't know if you remember Richard Jeni, but I certainly do. He had a series called Platypus Man that was pretty popular. But he was also one of those stand-up comedians that was a bit biting. I almost say that he helped usher in today's comedy a little bit, where it was always observant of the world around him, but in kind of a biting, sarcastic way. Not necessarily in the Jerry Seinfeld, isn't that weird kind of way, but in a different...
That was a good Jerry.
No, that one was not.
No?
Not my best. In fact, in this email, even Sully says to think of him like a Louis C.K. of the 90s.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily see the Louis C.K., but I could certainly see, I could see it a little bit. The unfortunate thing about Richard Jeni is, unfortunately, he committed suicide in 2007.
He died by suicide. Well, Richard was one of the characters in this episode. I think that maybe
this gives you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that, not just about suicide, but also about people like Richard Jenny, who make people laugh on the outside, but maybe on the inside aren't necessarily feeling the same way.
Well, I don't, it's unfortunate that for many entertainers and especially for comedians and comics, the rest of us, their fans, we don't realize that they're going through pain or that they're suffering, or that they self-harm and self-medicate. And I think Robin Williams is another example of this very dynamic where so many people were shocked by his death. And I corrected you because we tend to prefer to say things like that person died by suicide or that person suicided. To say committed suicide aligns it with a crime, right? You committed murder, you committed suicide. So I know you didn't mean anything by it, but the field is moving toward finding just more appropriate ways to describe that.
Right.
And I think it's, I'm gonna be kind of assertive with this. I think that it's a fallacy that it came out of the blue and that people didn't know. I think that people that are close to those individuals were given some kind of invitation. Again, I'm using a word instead of saying a risk or a red flag. It was an invitation. Like, life is tough right now. I'm giving away my things, I'm giving away my pets. I'm not going to book shows in 20, to give other people invitations as a way of saying, I need help, I'm struggling, and I trust you. And many times we get those invitations and we're sometimes not ready to hear them. We're sometimes too scared to ask what they mean because we're anxious, or we simply don't know what to do and miss an opportunity to explore what they mean by that. And so I'm not at all saying that it's our fault or that other people are responsible for the consequences, but that there are more opportunities to really kind of explore and uncover the reality of the lives of folks that are suffering with suicidal ideation. And for some people who don't have many people in their lives, they cannot extend those invitations. Who are they going to extend those invitations to? Maybe they do with strangers. Maybe they do with distant relatives. I mean, that's where I would say that then in those cases, it really does seem like it's out of nowhere. But I really kind of hate that myth that like, oh, no one knew, or, it was really inexplicable. I actually do think that persons who are suffering find ways to send us messages and invitations. And so, no fault, no blame, not trying to introduce that, but just the idea that, many times folks do reach out for help. And if we knew how to better predict this sort of thing, we would be better at saving lives, and we just are not. So I think that while there could potentially be, profile, a type of person that is likely to be someone with very low self-esteem who performs for a living, and who ends up feeling this way. Life just isn't worth living. I'm thinking of harming myself. It's not just this field. People
Right.
of all types of backgrounds and experiences
Sure.
and occupations feel this way. So I think it tends to, I hate this, now I'm going to use this metaphor, but it tends to get the spotlight because so many people have been touched by their work.
Right. No, I think that's smart. And certainly at the end of this episode, we'll tell you where you can go to learn more about suicide prevention. And if you're feeling the need, absolutely, there will be a link in our show notes over at UnderTheMaskOnline.com and, of course, over at Fanbase Press. So I want to go back for a second. We were talking a little bit about the ego and maybe even damaging the ego a little bit. Something occurred to me as I was watching this episode, and it's that almost that sort of sense of how failure can push you into something else, or that damaging the ego can almost put you into like a world of crime or whatever. For instance, like famously for those of us who love world history, Adolf Hitler wanted to be a painter. It was his rejection from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna that sent him back home, and then he had to deal with his sick mother, and never quite got back into painting and pursuing that dream, and then we know what happened. I mean, it's almost like people who are kicked in the ego when it comes to something they think they're good at. People who wanted to join the military or wanted to join the police academy and couldn't, have often gone and done something else. I think it's interesting. Not to say that if you're not a successful artist or you couldn't get into the police academy, you're going to become the Joker.
No, I wonder if this is another one of those like tropes or myths, because every time I'm not going to give attention to mass shooters, to those individuals by name or anything, but anytime you see those news stories, and we're seeing this now, unfortunately.
Yes, sadly.
There is a lot of times a review of that person's history, fired from this job or rejected from this group, or, didn't succeed. So it's almost like cherry picking these failures and pointing to this as this, meaning some harrowing, terrible act. Pointing to this as some kind of reconciliation or response or reaction. I don't know, I don't know that there's a lot of evidence there. You're just going from point A to point Z, and I don't know that there's a direct relationship. We know that people who actually experience some failure actually learn how to be resilient from it. And so some failure, some vulnerability is good for us.
Sure.
But folks who have a pattern of social rejection, failure, certainly that could lead to additional failure. Like just history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. The best predictor of a behavior is the behavior that came before. So I'm not sure it's necessarily a consequence of that, but more so just a part of the same pattern.
There are a lot of things we didn't necessarily think we would see in this episode. Mighty Mom, the sort of Roseanne Barr-like character, she ends up spanking Robin, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, that was a little weird. It's weird because he's not a minor. He's an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a young adult, but
then it gets weird because he's the one who's in charge of capturing her, while Batman goes after the Joker.
Right. Well, she puts him on. I mean,
Robin then has
it's not like she just spanks his butt. She puts him on her lap.
Yeah.
And spanks his butt. Like it's weird.
It's a little. You know what else we get to see? Joker's white legs. there at the end of the episode when Batman ends up saving.
We're right. We
the
do have to.
Joker.
We do have to talk about this because at the end of the episode, they end up on the rooftop, and the Joker falls or is put. I can't remember exactly what happens, but of course, Batman saves him.
Well, he falls off the balloon. And because he's got the trophy like goes onto his head and he can't see and he stumbles, he falls off the balloon and Batman fires his like grappling the little bat grapple gun hooky thing and catches the Joker, and then
his pants fall down.
Yeah.
And then he ends up on the street and everybody's laughing at him.
Which, on one hand, is what he's always wanted. I mean,
No. He doesn't want people to laugh at him and humiliate him.
Yeah.
Because now he's being ridiculed. This is not what he wants. And I actually feel really bad for him at this point.
So I have a question. And you might not like where this is going, but we've seen that Batman has amazing accuracy with the bat grapple. May I posit that he specifically went for the back of Joker's pants, knowing?
Yeah, like what he did, he did it on purpose to humiliate him.
Maybe.
I actually think so.
You want laughs, Joker? How about this? And he fires it, and suddenly everyone's laughing at the Joker because the Joker's really not all that happy. He's getting laughter from the citizens of Gotham for maybe the first time in his career that didn't require some sort of gas.
No, I mean, here it's interesting because obviously the laughs are about his underwear. It's humiliating because he's in his underwear. But
it's especially humiliating. Well, I mean, like, and uncomfortable for us, the audience, because he tries to pull his pants up and they fall down again. Like it's kind of sad.
It is, but I would even extend this humiliation to other insecurities that he has. Like, it's not just, his pants keep falling down and people are laughing at that. I think it raises other insecurities and vulnerabilities that he has, potentially revealing what his worst fears are about himself, that he's no good, he doesn't have value, he's not a person. Like, I think it takes it to another level, and that's kind of why I feel bad for him.
Yeah, it's kind of I just think about the fact that the last thing we see is him
like hobbling around,
walking toward the police van, hobbling toward the police van, and he's so embarrassed by the laughter that he sticks his head back in the trophy, hide himself.
Now, why doesn't he Charlie Chaplin it and just kind of like go with it?
Because it's a pride thing. It's that whole ego thing. It's that this isn't what he wants to go with. He's not rolling with the punches.
Well, and then it goes right back to the idea that Batman, one-upped him, is the superior performer, is the one who's the hero of that stage, is better than he is. Like, I think that dynamic is played out at the end.
Yeah. Drea, what did you think of this episode?
What happened? The end made me a little sad, but I liked it. I thought it was a little bit dated because of that Roseanne Barr reference. Like, it really is obvious when this took place, whereas most of the episodes are timeless to me.
Right.
Because I can't figure out what time period.
what time period they actually take place in. We just know that it's not now because of the technology. Yeah, I thought the episode was okay. I think it's an interesting episode to go out on when it comes to the Joker. That I find sort of interesting. I'm looking forward to our wrap-up episode of Batman the Animated Series, where we can look at the Joker and see all of those episodes that he's been a part of, and to see where we first met him in Christmas with the Joker, and then where his last appearance is. humiliated, sticking his head in a trophy, walking with his pants down and around his ankles toward a paddy wagon. And, that's a character I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about. So
I think you summed it up quite well.
Yeah, well, tune in in a couple of weeks, and you'll get to hear a crack analysis of the Joker from beginning to end by Dr. Andrea Letamendi. But I did enjoy the episode. I enjoyed knowing or getting to know a little bit more about what Robin and Alfred share as hobbies and pastimes, and imagining what they're like together, sitting on a couch by the fire, watching this annual comedy
Where's
festival.
Batman while all that's going on? Is he
Batman,
just-
look, Batman's like, you guys, I gotta go. I've got.
Why is
I've got
suddenly
people to
he's
beat up.
Beetlejuice? Why did he turn into Beetlejuice?
No, Batman, as we saw with Christmas with the Joker, Batman doesn't care what's on TV. Robin wants to sit there and watch It's a Wonderful Life. Robin wants to sit there and watch It's a Wonderful Life. Robin wants to sit there and watch this comic festival.
Maybe Robin has a television addiction.
Maybe Robin's a little too much like a teenager. All right, maybe he's like, let's just stay at home, watch some TV. And Batman's like, you do what you have to. I'm going out on the town. I'm gonna go find some old
Now
lady
he sounds
who's
like
been-
Nick Cage. Can you do
I'm
Bat-
going out on the town. Gonna find an old lady to see if she got mugged, and then find out that she's not. Oh, now it's Keanu Reeves.
I was gonna say no. Who's that? I was gonna
Whoa.
say Devil's Advocate.
Keanu Reeves.
No, the other.
No, it's Al Pacino. I don't do any of these impersonations. So, Drea, let's wrap this episode up. You've got some information for us.
Yes. So as we discussed earlier, this is the number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. That is U.S. national hotline. It's 24/7. Someone is always there to pick up. Please call that number if you're in a suicide-related crisis. There are international hotlines as well. You can go to suicide.org for those particular hotlines, depending on your location, of course. You can also go to iasp.info. That's the International Association for Suicide Prevention. So there is always someone who will listen. There is always someone who would pick up. All of the resources are there, and so we encourage you to use them.
Very good. And where can folks find you online?
I am on Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028. You can also go follow our family over at Fanbase Press. They are at fanbase_press on Twitter. You can also go to their website. They are fanbasepress.com. And of course, you can find us on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. Email us your questions. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com, or why don't you come on over to imzy.com/Arkham. That is imzy.com/Arkham. Request your invitation to our community. We will be happy to give you one. Then you just sign up and you can participate in our community over there over at IMZY. And of course, you can find us on Facebook. Just come like us and participate in the conversations over there. Until next week, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
Badum, boom.